September 26th, 52 BC. The plains surrounding Mount Auxois in eastern Gaul. Roman legionaries drag corpses from the killing field as dawn breaks over Alesia. What they find beneath the twisted bodies of Celtic warriors stops them cold. Horses. Thousands upon thousands of horses. But these aren't the scattered casualties of cavalry combat. They're piled in geometric patterns, deliberate ritualistic formations that no military engagement could explain. Centurion Marcus Fabius records in his campaign journal, "The beasts were arranged as spokes of a great wheel, their throats opened in unison, blood channels carved into the earth beneath them. This was no battle, this was sacrifice." But the truth was far more terrifying than even the battle-hardened Romans could comprehend. Before we uncover the truth about the Gallic war chariots and the nightmare that unfolded at Alesia, make sure to subscribe to Fierce Sermon and ring that notification bell. We're diving deep into one of history's most disturbing military mysteries, and you won't want to miss what we've uncovered. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community of mystery seekers. Now, let's descend into the darkness of 52 BC. The year is 52 BC, and the Roman Republic stands at the height of its territorial expansion. For 7 years, Gaius Julius Caesar has waged a brutal campaign of conquest across Gaul, modern-day France, Belgium, and parts of Switzerland and Germany. This isn't just military expansion. This is cultural annihilation. The Celtic tribes of Gaul have watched their sacred groves burned, their druids executed, their children sold into slavery. The Romans don't simply defeat enemies, they erase them. They turn proud warrior societies into provinces, free peoples into tax revenue, and by the summer of 52 BC, the Gauls have finally found their breaking point. His name is Vercingetorix, a chieftain of the Arverni tribe, barely 30 years old, with the kind of charisma that turns desperate men into fanatics. Ancient sources describe him as tall even by Celtic standards, with the ritual scars of druidic initiation marking his arms. But it's his eyes that people remember, the way they seem to look through you, seeing something beyond the present moment. Vercingetorix has accomplished what no Celtic leader before him could: unity. The fractious tribes of Gaul, the Aedui, the Sequani, the Helvetii, have set aside generations of blood feuds to follow this young commander. Their combined forces number over 200,000 warriors. It's the largest indigenous resistance Rome has ever faced. And at the center of this rebellion stands Alesia, a hilltop fortress town in what is now Burgundy. The settlement crowns Mount Auxois like a stone crown, its walls following the natural contours of the elevation. From the ramparts, you can see for miles across the Burgundian plains, perfect defensive terrain. Below the fortress, 2 rivers converge, providing water and creating natural obstacles for any besieging force. Vercingetorix has retreated here with his elite cavalry forces, 8,000 mounted warriors and their horses. These aren't the heavy cataphract cavalry of the East or the disciplined Roman equites. Celtic cavalry fights differently. They're raiders, fast-strike specialists who can materialize from nowhere, shatter a formation, and vanish before reinforcements arrive. Each warrior has been training since childhood, growing up on horseback, their bond with their mounts almost supernatural in its intimacy. The Celts believe horses are sacred, gifts from Epona, the goddess who guards the boundary between the mortal world and the spirit realm. To ride a horse is to touch the divine. To harm one needlessly is an abomination that can curse your bloodline for generations. But in the druid camps scattered around Alesia, something new is being whispered. A prophecy, a ritual, a way to turn the tide against Rome that requires a sacrifice beyond anything the tribes have contemplated before. The high druids speak of it only in the dead of night, and even then only to Vercingetorix himself. What they're proposing goes against every principle of Celtic warfare, every sacred tradition. But as Caesar's legions begin constructing their siege works around Alesia, a massive double wall of fortifications designed to trap the Gauls while preventing relief forces from breaking through, the whispers grow louder. Some choices, the druids say, transcend morality. Some acts open doorways that should remain closed. And the Romans are about to discover what happens when desperate men walk through those doorways. The Midnight Gathering, September 18th, 52 BC, 8 days before the final assault. A Roman cavalry scout named Lucius Petronius is on night patrol along Caesar's outer siege wall when he hears it, singing. But not the battle songs the Gauls typically use to raise morale. This is different, harmonized, almost hypnotic. In his report to Tribune Marcus Antonius, Petronius writes, The sound came from the northern quadrant of the fortress near their cavalry stables. I counted at least 40 voices, all male, all pitched in a register that made my teeth ache. The horses, both theirs and ours, became agitated. Our mounts refused to approach the wall. Some of the newer recruits' horses began bleeding from their nostrils. Tribune Antonius orders the scout to say nothing to the other men. Mass panic is the last thing the besieging force needs. But he notes the incident in his personal journal, adding a detail that wouldn't appear in the official record. Petronius is a veteran of the Germanic campaigns. I've seen him stand firm against charging tribesmen. Yet when he returned from that wall, his hands shook so badly he couldn't grip a wine cup. The Romans rationalize it as a druidic ceremony, religious theater meant to intimidate them. Caesar's forces have seen such displays before. The Celts believe in ritual, in the power of symbols and sacrifice. It's primitive superstition, nothing more. But over the next 3 nights, the singing continues. And each night it grows louder, more complex, more structured. The changed horses, September 21st, 52 BC. A Celtic defector, a minor noble from the Aedui tribe who has chosen to side with Rome rather than face certain destruction, provides Caesar's intelligence officers with disturbing information. The man's name is Litavicus, and he's risking execution by his own people to share what he's witnessed inside Alesia's walls. They're preparing the horses, he tells the interrogators through a translator, not for battle, for something else. Vercingetorix has forbidden anyone but the high druids and his personal guard from entering the cavalry stables. The head groom, a man who's cared for horses his entire life, tried to check on the animals 3 days ago. They dragged him out and flogged him publicly. When pressed for details, Litavicus describes something that makes even the hardened Roman officers uncomfortable. The horses have gone quiet, you understand? Celtic war horses are bred for aggression. They bite, they kick, they scream challenges at enemy mounts. But these animals make no sound anymore. They stand in their stalls absolutely motionless. When the druids come for them, they follow without resistance, without any sign of recognition or fear. The Romans record this testimony but attribute it to drugged feed. The Celts are known to use various herbs and compounds on their animals. Perhaps Vercingetorix is preparing his cavalry for some kind of suicidal final charge and wants the horses too sedated to panic. What the Romans don't know is that Litavicus has left out the most disturbing detail, something he can't quite articulate even to himself. When he looked into the eyes of those horses, he saw nothing, not fear, not aggression, not even animal confusion, just a vast, empty blankness, as if whatever made them horses had already been extracted. The geometry in the field, September 23, 52 BC. Roman surveyors conducting routine measurements of Caesar's siege works noticed something unusual in the fields between the inner and outer walls. During the night, someone from Alesia has etched patterns into the earth, spirals, concentric circles, radiating lines. The patterns are enormous, each one spanning over 50 feet in diameter. Chief Engineer Vitruvius records, "The designs are too precise to be decorative. They follow mathematical ratios I've only seen in Greek architecture, proportions that require sophisticated understanding of geometry. Moreover, they're positioned at exact intervals around the fortress, forming what appears to be a larger, geometric pattern when viewed from elevation. The patterns unnerve the Roman soldiers. They're too deliberate, too perfect. Celtic art is typically flowing and organic. These designs have an almost mechanical precision that seems alien to Celtic aesthetic principles. When Caesar is informed, he orders the patterns plowed under immediately. But that night they reappear. Same locations, same exact dimensions. And this time there's something new. At the center of each spiral the ground is stained dark. Not with blood. The stains are too uniform, too black. Something else. A young legionary named Titus Pullo volunteers to investigate one of the patterns up close. He returns within minutes, pale and sweating. "Sir," he reports to his centurion, "it smells like lightning. You know, after a storm, that metallic smell, but concentrated, like the air itself is burned." The silence before September 25th, 52 BC, one day before the final assault. This is when the Romans realize something is catastrophically wrong. For weeks, Alesia has been a hive of activity. Warriors shouting challenges from the walls, signal fires, the constant clatter of weapons being prepared. But on this morning, the fortress falls completely silent. No movement on the ramparts, no smoke from cooking fires, nothing. Caesar orders reconnaissance patrols to approach the walls under flag of truce. The scouts report that the gates remain closed, but they can see figures standing motionless on the walls. Celtic warriors in full armor, spears at their sides, staring outward with that same empty gaze that Litaviccus described in the horses. Centurion Marcus Fabius, who will survive the battle and later write one of the most detailed accounts of the siege, records, "It was as if the entire fortress had become a tomb whose occupants hadn't yet realized they were dead. The air above Alesia shimmered. Heat, I told myself, though the day was cool, but I've seen heat shimmer over desert sands in Africa. This was different. The light bent wrong. Colors seemed too vivid on one side of the fortress, too dim on the other, and beneath it all that smell of burned air growing stronger with each hour." That evening, as the sun sets over Alesia, the singing begins again. But this time it's not coming from the fortress, it's coming from beneath the ground, from the patterns etched in the fields, from the very earth itself. The sound rises until even men in the Roman camps 3 miles away can hear it, a single sustained note that makes stone walls vibrate and sets off mass panic among the army's horses. The Romans can no longer dismiss this as theater. This is something else entirely. And tomorrow, it will be unleashed. If this story is giving you chills, hit that like button. We're about to reveal what the Romans discovered on that blood-soaked morning. Share this with someone who loves dark mysteries. Let's discover what happens next. September 26th, 52 BC. Dawn. The attack comes before first light, which itself is a violation of Celtic military tradition. Celtic warriors believe battle is a sacred act conducted under the sun's gaze. To fight in darkness is to dishonor the gods. But as Roman sentries strain their eyes toward Alesia, they realize this isn't going to be a conventional assault. The gates open, no war cries, no trumpet calls, just silence broken only by the sound of 8,000 horses emerging from the fortress in perfect formation. Centurion Fabius, positioned on the inner wall, describes what he sees. They came down the hillside like a river of living shadows. The cavalry was arranged in those same spiral patterns we'd seen carved in the earth, concentric wheels of riders moving in synchronized formation. I've witnessed cavalry charges from Germania to Britannia. This was something else. The horses moved as one organism, each step synchronized with impossible precision, and above them the air itself seemed to tear open. Tribune Antonius, commanding the northern sector, adds critical detail. The riders sat their mounts without movement, no guiding hands on reins, no pressure from legs, no verbal commands I could detect, yet the horses executed maneuvers that would challenge our best-trained cavalry. They turned in unison, they accelerated and decelerated as a single mass, and their eyes, gods preserve me, their eyes reflected the torchlight wrong, like looking into polished bronze instead of living tissue. The Roman defensive strategy at Alesia is multi-layered, ditches filled with sharpened stakes, buried caltrops, kill zones designed to funnel attackers into crossfire. These fortifications have held against every Gallic assault for months. They should shred a cavalry charge. They don't. The first wave of Celtic horses reaches the outer ditch, a trench 15 feet deep, filled with stakes hardened in fire, and doesn't stop. The horses leap the gap in perfect synchronization. Not possible, Fabius writes. No natural horse could clear that distance from a standstill, yet they soared across as if gravity itself had loosened its grip on them. The second line of defenses, a killing field 200 yards wide where Roman archers and slingers can bring devastating fire down on any attacker. The Celts charge directly into it. This is when the Romans realize that Vercingetorix and his riders aren't trying to break through the siege. They're trying to reach the geometric patterns carved between the walls, and they're willing to sacrifice every mount to do it. Legionary Titus Pullo, manning a ballista tower, records, "I've killed men in battle. It's quick, you don't think, you just act. But this was different. We were firing volleys into mass formations at close range, impossible to miss. I watched my bolt hit a horse square in the chest, saw the point emerge from its back. The animal didn't slow, didn't react, just kept running with this massive shaft of wood protruding from its body like it was an inconvenience, not a fatal wound." The Celtic riders begin directing their horses toward the spiral patterns. As each animal reaches the center of a spiral, its rider cuts the mount's throat with a ceremonial blade. One swift, practiced motion. The horse collapses into the exact center of the pattern, blood pouring into channels carved in the earth that the Romans hadn't noticed before. Fabius. The blood didn't pool, it flowed along those channels like water through an aqueduct, moving outward in perfect, geometric lines, filling the carved spirals with crimson. And where the blood touched the burned ground at the pattern centers, the air began to split open. What the Romans see next will be disputed in historical records for generations. Some later scholars will claim mass hallucination brought on by ergot poisoning in the legion's grain supply. Others will attribute the accounts to the fog of war and traumatized memories. But dozens of independent testimonies from soldiers positioned across miles of siege works all describe the same phenomenon: the air tears. That's the only way the witnesses can articulate it, not a visual illusion or smoke or fog, the fabric of reality itself ripping open like cloth under a blade. And through those tears, something presses from the other side. Fabius writes, "I saw geometries that should not exist in our world, shapes that hurt to perceive, as if my eyes were trying to comprehend dimensions they were never meant to witness. And within those impossible angles, I saw movement, things that were almost horses but wrong in ways I cannot articulate. Too many legs, or eyes where legs should be, or bodies that seem to fold back into themselves." The Celtic writers continue their work with mechanical precision. As each horse dies, its body begins to contort. Not decay, transformation. The flesh ripples and restructures, bones extending and reconfiguring under the skin. The process takes seconds, and what rises from each spiral pattern is no longer recognizably a horse. Tribune Antonius orders his archers to target the riders performing the ritual. It's too late. By the time the Romans shift their fire, over 4,000 horses have been sacrificed across the geometric patterns surrounding Alesia. 4,000 portals have opened, and through them, something ancient and hungry is pushing through. Chief Engineer Vitruvius, observing from Caesar's command position, makes the most clinical observation. The druids weren't trying to win the siege. They were using the siege, using our presence, our formations, our structured military approach as the final component of something larger. We'd built the geometric cage ourselves with our walls and towers. They just needed to activate it. The things emerging from the portal wounds aren't spirits or ghosts or any concept the Romans have in their mythological framework. They're solid, physical, and they're composed of the same matter as the horses, literally reformed from the sacrificed flesh. Celtic warriors who participated in other aspects of the ritual later described them as the Morrigan's Hunt, creatures from the goddess of war's retinue, summoned to devour Rome's eagles. A legionary named Sextus Baculus, who survives the initial assault, provides the most detailed description. Picture a horse, but stretched, elongated. The neck extends until the head is 15 feet from the body, held on a column of flesh that undulates like a serpent. The legs are segmented, jointed in places that allow movement in impossible directions. The hooves have become talons, curved, serrated, designed for rending rather than running. And the eyes, no longer eyes, just voids. Windows into whatever realm these things emerged from. These creatures turn on the Celtic riders first. This detail appears in every Roman account. The summoned entities don't distinguish between ally and enemy. They consume Vercingetorix's cavalry with the same mechanical efficiency the riders showed in the sacrifice. Fabius, the Gallic warriors didn't try to flee. They sat on their dying, transforming mounts and let the creatures tear them apart. I realized then that they'd known this would happen. The ritual required their deaths too. The horses were just the doorways. The riders were the offering that would keep those doorways open. The massacre of Vercingetorix cavalry takes less than an hour. 8,000 riders, 8,000 horses, reduced to scattered fragments across the killing fields. But the portals remain open. The creatures continue to emerge, and now they turn toward the Roman siege works. What follows isn't a battle. It's an extermination event. The things from beyond attack with no regard for self-preservation, moving through Roman formations like scythes through wheat. Ballista bolts pass through them without effect. Sword strikes find no vital organs because these creatures have no anatomy that corresponds to earthly life. They're more force than flesh, hunger given physical form. Caesar orders a full retreat from the inner siege wall. It's the first time in his military career he'll abandon a fortified position to an enemy. The legions pull back in chaos, abandoning equipment, casualties, everything. The things pursue for exactly 3 miles to the edge of the outer siege wall, then stop as if hitting an invisible barrier. As dawn fully breaks over Alesia, the Romans regroup and look back toward the fortress. The hilltop is silent again. The gates remain closed. And strewn across the killing fields between the inner and outer walls are the bodies, or what's left of them, of 8,000 horses, 8,000 riders, and 3,000 Roman soldiers. The geometric patterns carved in the earth glow with residual heat, visible even in daylight. The portal tiers in the air shimmer like heat mirages, slowly, gradually beginning to close. Centurion Fabius records the final, most disturbing observation. As we watched from the outer wall, we saw the creatures that had emerged from the sacrifices begin to collapse. They didn't die. They unmade themselves, body parts dissolving back into the earth at the spiral centers. Within 2 hours, every last one had vanished. The portals sealed. The burned smell faded. And across those blood-soaked fields, the only evidence of what we'd witnessed were the perfectly preserved corpses of 8,000 horses, arranged in spirals, their throats opened, their eyes still reflecting that empty void. The Romans expected the Gallic relief army to attack while they were in disarray. It never comes. Later intelligence reveals that the druids leading the ritual had promised the relief forces that the summoning would break the siege. When it failed to do so, when it only created a temporary manifestation that ultimately consumed its own summoners, the coalition army dissolved. The tribes blamed each other, blamed Vercingetorix, blamed the druids. Within days, the unified Gallic resistance had shattered into feuding factions. Vercingetorix surrenders to Caesar on September 28th. In his surrender speech, translated by Celtic collaborators, he says only, "We opened a door that was meant to remain closed. The price was paid. The debt is settled. Do with me what you will." Caesar faces an impossible problem. He's just won the most significant military victory of his career. The conquest of Gaul is essentially complete with Vercingetorix's surrender. But how does he report what happened at Alesia to the Roman Senate? The official dispatches are masterpieces of selective truth. Caesar's Commentarii de Bello Gallico, Commentaries on the Gallic Wars, describes the final assault at Alesia as a desperate cavalry charge that was repulsed with heavy losses to both sides. The geometric patterns aren't mentioned. The transformations aren't mentioned. The entire supernatural element is simply erased from the historical record. But Caesar knows he can't rely on silence alone. 3,000 Roman soldiers witnessed what happened. Survivors will talk. Already whispers are spreading through the legions, stories of gods and monsters, of druids who can tear holes in the world, of sacrifices that summon things from beyond the veil of death. Within a week of Vercingetorix's surrender, Caesar implements a comprehensive information control strategy that would serve as a template for military cover-ups throughout history. First, he transfers the units that participated in the final assault to different legions, scattering them across Gaul and eventually to campaigns in Britannia and Germania. Men who fought side by side during the portal manifestation are separated, sent to opposite ends of the empire. It's harder to corroborate a story when your fellow witnesses are 1,000 miles away. Second, he promotes the officers who were present: Centurion Fabius, Tribune Antonius, Chief Engineer Vitruvius, giving them prestigious postings that come with implied conditions. Fabius is assigned to Caesar's personal staff. Antonius receives a command in the lucrative eastern provinces. Vitruvius is sent to Rome itself to work on architectural projects. The message is clear: stay silent and prosper, talk and lose everything. Third, and most ruthlessly, Caesar orders the execution of every druid captured at Alesia. Not the standard execution for military prisoners; those are often enslaved or ransomed. This is systematic extermination. 147 druids are crucified along the road leading from Alesia to the nearest Roman garrison town. Their bodies are left on display for months as a warning. But one druid is spared, the high priest who designed the ritual. Caesar has him transported to Rome in chains. The man, ancient texts give his name as Divitiacus, though this may be pseudonymous, is interrogated extensively by Caesar's personal scholars and advisors. The interrogation records, fragments of which survive in the Library of Alexandria before its destruction, reveal the terrifying scope of what the Celts attempted. Divitiacus explains that the ritual was ancient, passed down through Druidic oral tradition for over 1,000 years. It was a weapon of last resort, meant to be used only when a culture faced total annihilation. The Romans believe they conquered Gaul, Divitiacus tells his interrogators. They don't understand. Gaul was never the target. Gaul was the key. The geographic position, the confluence of ley lines, the blood of our people soaked into this soil over centuries. This land is a thin place where the veil between worlds grows gossamer. What we did at Alesia was simply tear that veil deliberately. When asked what the creatures were, Divitiacus provides an answer that Roman scholars struggle to comprehend. They are potential. They are what horses might become if evolution continued for 10,000 generations along paths closed to our reality. We didn't summon beings from another place. We summoned possibilities from another time. Futures that haven't happened yet. Shouldn't happen ever. The most disturbing part of his testimony concerns the ritual's failure, because from the Druids' perspective, it didn't fail. We knew the manifestation would be temporary, Divitiacus states. We knew the summoners would die. That was the cost. What we hoped was that in that window of chaos, Rome would break, that the legions would scatter in terror, that Caesar would be forced to retreat, that we would buy time for the tribes to regroup. The Romans didn't break. This fact seems to genuinely surprise the High Druid. Your soldiers saw impossible things. Reality itself violated every natural law before their eyes, yet they held formation, they maintained military discipline. This tells me your empire is more dangerous than we understood. You don't just conquer land, you conquer the imagination. You refuse to let the impossible be possible. Caesar has Divitiacus killed quietly, strangled in his cell. No public execution, no trial. The man simply disappears from the historical record. The legal aftermath is equally problematic. Vercingetorix is held in Roman custody for 6 years before being ritually strangled during Caesar's triumph celebration in 46 BC, but the charges against him never mention anything supernatural. He's executed for rebellion, for breaking treaties, for war crimes against Roman citizens. The official indictment makes no reference to human sacrifice, to summoning rituals, to portal magic. This legal silence serves multiple purposes. First, it prevents the druids from becoming martyrs to some greater cosmic cause. They're just rebels, not prophets. Second, it avoids legitimizing Celtic religious practices by acknowledging them as genuine threats. If Rome admits that druidic magic works, even if it condemns it, that admission gives power to the very beliefs they're trying to suppress. Third, and perhaps most calculated, the silence protects Roman cognitive infrastructure. The empire runs on predictability, on laws that work the same everywhere, on roads that connect everywhere, on a rational administrative system that treats the world as fundamentally comprehensible. Admitting that reality can be torn open, that creatures from beyond time can manifest in response to blood sacrifice, undermines that entire worldview. But the silence isn't total, it can't be. Too many people saw too much, so instead of absolute denial, Roman authorities pursue a strategy of recontextualization. Stories of the Alesia ritual do spread throughout the empire, but they spread as mythology, as superstition, as the kind of campfire horror tales soldiers tell to frighten new recruits. The stories are deliberately not suppressed. That would only make them more alluring. Instead, they're allowed to circulate in degraded form, stripped of specific details, contradicted by multiple versions, until the truth becomes indistinguishable from fiction. Within a generation, you can find a dozen different accounts of what happened at Alesia. Some say the Gauls sacrificed their children, not horses. Others claim Vercingetorix made a pact with demons. Still others insist the whole thing was a weather phenomenon, ball lightning, or some unusual atmospheric effect that Caesar's men misinterpreted in the chaos of battle. The Roman approach to information control proves devastatingly effective. By the time Tacitus and Plutarch write their histories a century later, the supernatural elements at Alesia are mentioned only as curious footnotes, local legends, probably exaggerated, that circulated among the legions. No serious historian treats them as factual, yet certain details persist in unexpected places. Military protocols change after Alesia. Roman armies constructing siege works are explicitly forbidden from creating geometric patterns in their fortifications. The prohibition is officially explained as preventing enemy forces from using Roman construction as ritual tools, a practical measure. But the specific geometric ratios that are banned match exactly the patterns witnessed at Alesia. Druidic practices are outlawed throughout the empire with unusual harshness. Roman religion is typically syncretic. They're happy to absorb and Romanize foreign gods. But Druids are given no such accommodation. They're hunted, executed, their sacred groves destroyed with systematic thoroughness. The official reasoning is political. Druids are educators and judges who maintain Celtic cultural identity. But the violence of the suppression suggests deeper fears. Archaeological evidence from the Alesia site adds another layer to the mystery. When French archaeologists excavated the siege works in the 19th century, they found exactly what Roman accounts described: concentric fortifications, kill zones, weapon caches. But they also found something the ancient sources don't mention, a layer of unusual mineral deposits in the soil between the inner and outer walls. These deposits, primarily magnetite and hematite, are arranged in geometric patterns that match the descriptions in Centurion Fabius's journal. Geological analysis confirms they're not natural formations. Someone deliberately placed them there. And they show evidence of exposure to extreme heat, temperatures that shouldn't be possible with Bronze Age technology. Modern forensic analysis of bone fragments from the site reveals another anomaly. Horse remains show unusual cellular degradation patterns inconsistent with normal death. The bone marrow has crystalline structures that don't occur in nature. When examined under electron microscopes, these structures reveal geometric lattices at the molecular level, patterns that seem to echo the large-scale spirals carved in the earth. Researchers can't explain these findings. The leading theory is that the bones were exposed to some kind of electromagnetic phenomenon, perhaps a lightning strike that hit the site during or shortly after the battle. But that doesn't explain the deliberate geometric arrangement. It doesn't explain the cellular-level patterns. It doesn't explain why similar anomalies don't appear at any other ancient battlefield. The Vercingetorix cult that emerges in later centuries further complicates the historical record. By the Medieva period, the Gallic chieftain has become a semi-legendary figure, a Christian martyr in some traditions, a pagan hero in others. Various groups claim to possess secret knowledge of the true ritual of Alesia, usually as part of broader hermetic or occult systems. These claims are almost certainly fabrications. The actual details of the ritual died with the druids who performed it. But the persistence of the legend suggests that something about Alesia resonates through European cultural memory, a sense that something fundamental was lost or hidden there, some truth about reality that official histories refuse to acknowledge. One final detail, in Caesar's personal correspondence, preserved in fragmentary form. There's a letter to his close friend Atticus written in 51 BC, 1 year after Alesia. Caesar rarely discusses personal feelings in his writing. He's famously controlled, clinical, objective. But in this letter, he allows himself a moment of vulnerability. I have conquered Gaul, dear friend. The Senate will award me a triumph. Poets will praise my victory for generations. But I have seen things at the edge of Alesia that make me question what victory means. We defeated an enemy who was willing to tear reality itself apart rather than submit. In doing so, they showed me that the world is far stranger and more terrible than our philosophy admits. I sleep poorly now. In my dreams, I see those spirals, those geometries, those things that shouldn't exist. And I wonder, in defeating the Gauls, have we simply delayed an inevitable reckoning with forces beyond our comprehension? The letter ends there. Atticus's response, if he wrote one, hasn't survived. The events at Alesia in 52 BC created ripple effects that shaped Western civilization in ways we're still uncovering today. Some implications are obvious and well documented. Others are subtle, hidden in the substructure of cultural evolution, visible only when you know where to look. The most immediate impact was military. Before Alesia, Roman siege warfare was relatively straightforward. Surround the enemy, starve them out, assault the walls. After Alesia, Roman military doctrine develops an almost paranoid attention to geometric security protocols. Imperial military manuals from the 1st century AD include specific prohibitions against certain construction patterns. Fortification walls must never be built in concentric circles with fewer than 6 layers. Siege works must avoid creating enclosed spaces with specific mathematical ratios. Any natural geometric formations near military camps, rock outcroppings, tree arrangements, river patterns, must be documented and, if necessary, deliberately disrupted. These protocols aren't explained in the manuals. They're simply listed as standard practice, the way modern military handbooks include procedures without always detailing the disasters that made them necessary. But the mathematical specifications are eerily precise, matching the patterns witnesses described at Alesia. The Roman persecution of druidic practices intensifies in ways that exceed normal cultural suppression. When Rome conquers territories, they typically allow local religious traditions to continue, as long as they don't threaten political stability. Local gods get absorbed into the Roman pantheon. Local priests become administrators within Roman religious infrastructure. But druids are different. They're systematically exterminated across Europe. Their sacred texts, the oral traditions they'd maintained for over a millennium, are deliberately destroyed. Any person claiming druidic knowledge is executed, no exceptions. The ferocity suggests that Rome isn't just eliminating political rivals, they're trying to erase dangerous information from human memory. This cultural genocide succeeds almost completely. By 200 AD, genuine druidic traditions have been wiped out. What survives is fragmentary, bits of mythology, romanticized legends, Renaissance forgeries. The actual Nold, GE base, the mathematical and ritual frameworks that might have allowed someone to replicate what happened at Alesia, is gone. Except it's not entirely gone. Because information, once released into culture, never fully disappears. It transforms, mutates, finds new vessels. Medieval European grimoires, supposed books of magic, begin appearing around the 12th century. Most are obvious forgeries, Christian mysticism dressed up with Hebrew and Arabic terminology, but buried in a few of them are geometric patterns that match the Alesia spirals. The Key of Solomon, the Lesser Key of Solomon, various Hermetic texts, they all include ritual diagrams featuring concentric circles, radiating lines, specific mathematical ratios. Are these genuine fragments of druidic knowledge, filtered through centuries of transmission, or are they coincidental patterns that humans find intuitively significant? It's impossible to know for certain, but the geometric similarities are striking. And some of these medieval texts include warnings about doorways and thin places and things that should remain unborn, language that echoes the fragmentary accounts of what the druids told their Roman interrogators. The scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries takes a specific approach to understanding nature: mathematical description, geometric analysis, the reduction of complex phenomena to quantifiable patterns. This methodology yields extraordinary results. We can predict planetary orbits, engineer complex machines, eventually split atoms and sequence genomes. But there's another side to this coin. By insisting that reality is fundamentally mathematical, that geometry describes the deep structure of the universe, we might be inadvertently validating the same principles the druids exploited at Alesia. If geometric patterns can open doorways when arranged with blood sacrifice, what might they open when arranged in particle accelerators, in quantum computers, in the mathematical models we use to describe reality itself? Modern physics encounters genuinely strange phenomena. Quantum entanglement, where particles remain connected across vast distances. The observer effect, where measurement changes outcomes. The mathematical necessity of extra dimensions that we can't perceive. These discoveries don't prove that the druids were right about anything, but they do suggest that reality is far weirder than classical Roman rationalism could accommodate. Similar patterns emerge across different cultures, different time periods, different geographic regions. The Aztec practice of mass ritual sacrifice, was it purely religious theater, or were they attempting something similar to the Alesia ritual? The sudden collapse of the Mayan civilization, preceded by increasingly desperate and elaborate sacrificial practices, coincidence or failed attempts to tear reality open. The Salem witch trials of 1692, where witnesses described geometric patterns in the woods and impossible animal transformations. The dancing plague of 1518, where hundreds of people danced until they died, following spiral patterns through the streets of Strasbourg. The Tunguska event of 1908, where something created a massive explosion over Siberia, flattening forests in radial patterns, with no conclusive explanation. None of these events can be definitively linked to the kind of ritual performed at Alesia, but they suggest a persistent human impulse. When faced with existential threats, some people will attempt to manipulate reality's fundamental structure, regardless of the cost. The modern implications are perhaps most concerning. We live in an age of information saturation, where geometric patterns are everywhere, in computer code, in architectural design, in the mathematical models that govern financial markets and predict weather patterns. We've created a civilization built on deliberate, precise geometric arrangements at scales the ancient world couldn't imagine. What if the druids' error wasn't attempting the ritual, but attempting it with insufficient scale? What if the real danger isn't ancient sacrifices, but modern systems that create geometric information patterns across global networks, processing zettabytes of data in server farms arranged according to optimal mathematical configurations? Quantum computing researchers have noticed anomalies. Certain computational patterns produce results that shouldn't be possible according to our understanding of information theory. These glitches are typically attributed to hardware errors or quantum decoherence, but some researchers have noted that the anomalies cluster around specific geometric arrangements of qubits, arrangements that, coincidentally or not, echo patterns described in medieval grimoires. CERN scientists have reported unusual readings during high-energy collisions that create brief geometric patterns in particle interactions. Official explanations focus on undiscovered particles or quantum effects. Unofficial conversations among physicists sometimes use different language: windows, glimpses, momentary instabilities in space-time fabric. These modern phenomena might be entirely unrelated to what happened at Alesia. The human brain is wired to find patterns, to connect disparate events into narrative structure. Coincidence often masquerades as conspiracy. But there's one detail that's harder to dismiss. In 1974, archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar at the Alesia site discovered something unexpected. Deep beneath the battlefield, approximately 30 feet down, there's a network of chambers carved into the bedrock. The chambers are arranged in, predictably, geometric patterns: spirals, concentric circles, radiating lines. The French government has restricted access to the site. Official statements describe the chambers as Celtic storage facilities or ceremonial spaces, nothing unusual for an Iron Age settlement. But the restrictions include specific prohibitions: no electromagnetic scanning, no drilling, no excavation below the 20-foot depth. A geologist who briefly examined the site before the restrictions were imposed, Dr. Marie Leclerc of the University of Burgundy, noted in her preliminary report that the chambers showed evidence of intense heat exposure inconsistent with their supposed age and function. She also documented unusual mineral deposits similar to those found on the battlefield surface. Dr. Leclerc's research program was defunded 6 months later. When questioned, she said only, "Some doors should remain closed, some questions shouldn't be answered. History sometimes protects us by forgetting." The lasting impact of Alesia might ultimately be this: it established a template for how civilizations handle information that threatens their fundamental worldview. Deny publicly, investigate privately, suppress when necessary, and above all, maintain the fiction that reality is stable, predictable, and fundamentally comprehensible. This approach has served us well. It allows scientific progress, technological development, the construction of complex societies based on shared rational principles. But it also means we might be collectively blind to aspects of reality that don't fit the approved narrative. The Celtic druids tried to win a war by tearing holes in reality. They failed, or succeeded too briefly to matter. The Roman Empire responded by erasing the attempt from history, turning it into legend, myth, campfire horror stories. But the knowledge doesn't disappear. It just waits. In fragmentary texts, in archaeological anomalies, in the persistent human intuition that the world is stranger than we're allowed to believe, and in the geometric patterns we continue to create, in architecture, technology, information systems. Never quite sure whether we're building tools or preparing rituals. What do you think drove the druids of Alesia to attempt something so catastrophic? Were they desperate survivors willing to risk anything? Or did you understand forces about reality that we've forgotten? Leave your theories in the comments below. If you want to explore more lost chapters of history, the events that official records buried, the stories that challenge everything we think we know, subscribe to Fear's Sermon. We're uncovering the darkness behind civilization's polished surface, one terrifying case at a time. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. And remember, history doesn't just happen. Sometimes, it's actively suppressed. See you in the next video.